it really does, you know, fill me up. And I suppose it's just made me who I am. It's made me a calmer person. It's made me sort of see the bigger picture, and to see how important, I suppose, it can be to garden and to grow your own food. And I suppose I've been doing that now for 30 odd years. So I, like a lot of people, I was watching lots of things in the downturn when I wasn't in the garden, and the lockdown, and I was watching this incredible film. I highly recommend people see it. It's called Inhabit. So it's about permaculture principles. And there was this amazing man called, what was his name again? His name was Ramez Kent, and he is the co-director of the Permaculture Research Institute. And basically he just had a one or two liner, and he was talking about the importance of photosynthesis. And of course, we all know about photosynthesis and this incredible way that the sun has an effect on plants and changes glucose into energy and makes the plant material and plants grow and all that happens. But sometimes you have to actually hear someone else remind you of the importance of that process, because that's what's happening outside in my garden at the moment, and all our gardens and all the green stuff that's going on around us. That's an incredible resource. And what he was basically saying was that we sometimes forget about that process. Then why not leverage that? Why not actually use that process and use the sun as best we can, and the wind and the energy and all those things, and to be in nature and to watch how that takes care of itself. We don't have to do anything. Like the sun and all that stuff makes plants and makes matter for us. So I was just struck by that, and it just hit me again, the importance of that. And that was just one bit I took from watching that brilliant film. And then it went on to show all these amazing people growing all these amazing things in the most incredible places all over the world, like rooftop gardens and community gardens in sort of, you know, places that were kind of poverty ridden and all kinds of amazing things. So it was like hugely inspiring. You know, we import 75–80% of the food that we eat on this island. And if you stand back and think for a second, you know, how kind of crazy that is. Okay, we're getting a bit of a handle on the whole plastic thing and all that, but you know, you still are up against it when you want to kind of get a myriad of veg and different colors into your kids and all those things, and you don't have time to garden. So what I've done is I've kind of put all of my resources and all my knowledge and all my time, I suppose, this last while into, I suppose, what I'm calling a wild edible garden. And it really is based on, I suppose, the most beautiful man that I know that has taught about forest gardening, which is Robert Hart, and I'm reading his books. And what I discovered over the last while is the bit of land that I have. There was an old native hedgerow, an edible hedgerow, you know, that thankfully was preserved and I kept. And underneath that then was all these lovely shady places where all these beautiful shade-loving plants grow. And because I suppose I look after the soil, because I suppose that to me is the number one thing. You have to look after your soil. If you look after your soil, you've got a healthy plant, and it doesn't need any other intervention really from outside stuff. So I discovered that all these plants in my garden were self-seeding, because obviously being organic, I don't spray anything. So what I did was, instead of having a big vegetable garden that used to go out of control because I didn't have time to mind it, I started to basically transfer all the wild edible plants from within my surrounds into a huge area. There's a sunny place down at the end of the garden, and these are self-seeding calendulas that just grow now everywhere. So what happened when I started to transplant all these wild plants and weeds that are probably some of my favorite plants in the whole world into this dedicated space? So they all thought that they had just kind of died and gone to heaven, and literally, excuse the pun, they had a field day. So I have plantain in my garden at the moment. It's broadleaf plantain. Apart from it being what they call nature's band-aid, it is the most fantastic plant for so many things. Really good for a cough. The seeds are edible, the young leaves are edible. But the leaves are about, they're actually gigantic. And it just kind of settled in there, and it just loves being there. And I just love seeing it absolutely thrive. So I put in as much, wild plants, and the whole emphasis is, I suppose, on low maintenance perennial plants that come back every year. And I know a lot of people are a bit worried about things taking over. But I've stuck in the mints, and I've done that because mint, it will take over a good bit, but it's fairly slow. It's not hugely invasive, and you can dig out bits of it and give it to your friends and all that. So I have about 4 different mints going on. I have lemon balm. I have borage now that completely self-seeds. So that's just a little snippet of it. Now there is a big self-seeding brassica in there as well, which is the curly kale, the raggedy jack kale from Seed Savers. That just self-seeds all over my garden. So when I just get a new plant of that, I just uproot it and I put it into a different place. And everything just seems to, I suppose, kind of be working together. So there is no soil whatsoever really being left uncovered. And what I've learned is, this is one of the goosefoots. It's Good King Henry or Iraq or one of those ones. I suppose we have to look at our soil a bit like our skin. So, you don't really go around with your skin too exposed, especially in the wintertime. And the soil is like that. If you look after your soil, and in the wintertime, a lot of people will say, we put it to bed and they put loads of seaweed and mulch on it. But you keep it covered. You're better off to keep the soil covered with a weed than bare. So this thing of like immaculate garden beds with no weeds and stuff, we need to kind of maybe look at that again, because weeds are our friends. And weeds have the ability to indicate to us sometimes what the soil is underneath and what it's doing, like nettles are an indicator of fertility, and all the different weeds. But weeds also draw up amazing nutrients from the soil, and they make them available to other plants. And they actually send nutrients around the garden. And if you start to kind of research that and use weeds as our friends in the garden, and of course weeds are edible. So many of them are edible. So we kind of just, it's a mindset I suppose a lot of us have about getting rid of weeds and getting rid of things. So I use all those in my garden as ground cover. I just leave the weeds now to be themselves. Some of the taller plants will take over. And what I've started to do is to introduce a lot more of what this plant is, which is a growing fertility plant, and it's called a green manure. And this is fenugreek, believe it or not, which is a beautiful plant. So simple to broadcast, just shake the seeds around and off you go. And this is about 6 weeks growing, and it has covered a whole area. So you can let them go to flower, and of course I let an awful lot of plants go to flower because I just love to watch them and see how they grow. But if you don't want to do that, you can chop it down and you can let it just break down into the soil or dig it back in. So it's a wonderful growing fertility plant, is a green manure. And in organics, it's used as one of the rotation crops. I also learned that chickweed is the green manure. And I don't know if a lot of you know that beautiful plant chickweed. I always eat it in my salad and make lovely pesto from it. But I also leave it as a growing fertility plant. Because it's got very small roots, it's better to have a whole bed full of chickweed than a whole bare plant. So rather than take out the chickweed, just leave it there and chop it down and dig it back in. So I suppose it's just looking at plants differently, looking at how beneficial they are. and that they really deserve, and all these weeds deserve a place in our gardens if we can and find the uses for them. I know I've done an awful lot of work on stuff, and I know an awful lot of uses of the plants, but this is, of course, our nettles. Believe it or not, these are nettles that I chopped down about 6 weeks ago also. They were just in a huge big area and they were getting way too big, and I had enough to harvest and I had enough left over to go to seed, which I harvest also. And then what happens is you harvest these about 6 weeks ago and they actually come back. You get a second flush of amazing nettles. And actually I have nettle beer on the go, glass of later on. Fantastic. Um, Nettles are used for dye. They're a fiber plant. They have been used for so many things, and of course they are an absolutely wonderful resource because we just eat them in the springtime. My aunt in Tipperary says eat 3 feeds of nettles in May, and that's your kind of iron content for the year. I just have a thing about nettles. I even like getting stung with them, but that's for another day. So yeah, they're just great, and of course they are a wonderful biodiversity plant because so many creatures live on them. I have a photograph there of some. I forget his name. It's a beautiful black caterpillar that lives on them. So the other wonderful thing, I suppose, about wild gardening and being a little bit creative, I suppose, is letting a lot of things go to seed. And this is these are leeks from last year, and of course they send out these beautiful big allium tops on them. I also have some celery that I've left go to seed and lots of different things. So it's sort of it's sort of self and very low maintenance. Wild gardening is. I suppose Robert Hart's whole message is he coined a phase which is like forest gardening. Now it's not gardening in a forest; it's mimicking, I suppose, how a forest grows, and really it is quite simple. Is that there's about 6 different canopies. You've got the taller trees, you've got the smaller ones, and you have maybe the apple trees and the fruiting trees, the smaller fruit bushes, perennial herbs, and then you have ground cover herbs and ground cover plants. And they all, I suppose, feed each other through leaves and all the decaying, wonderful recycling that happens in a garden. And I just love that idea. So around the whole border of my garden, there's an old neglected hedge, but a lot of the wild plants love being kind of in there and they kind of thrive in a kind of shady place. So once you get a little bit of it established, an awful lot of it kind of looks after itself because the plants that are meant to be there will kind of thrive and take over. The ones that don't really like that bit of soil will kind of die back and they'll indicate to you, you know, don't like it here, I want to move or I want to go somewhere else. This is the plantain I was telling you about. I mean, hello. I mean, you could, I don't know, it's just incredible. So what I'll do is I'll save the seeds of the plantain. You can see they're getting big there. There's a variety of plantain called Oonagh, and it's actually where you get the psyllium seeds from, which are the ones that are used like a little flaxseed. It's one of my absolute all-time plants. I have lots of that drying at the moment, and I make a salve from it and lots of different things. This is another beautiful thing that happened because we had the no mow May, and I have a small bit of a lawn because we leave that for the boys to play soccer on, but bits of it got neglected and didn't get cut. So what happened was all these amazing wildflowers came back, and this is one of our beautiful ones. This is Brunella or self-heal as they call it. Also makes a beautiful ointment and lots of things for your skin. And how beautiful is that to have in your garden? It's like violets and all sorts of things. And of course, around the edge then of this overgrown hedge is where all the wild fruit like that happens on a forest. That's where it grows. And plug in. So I've started to introduce other wild fruit, and I have things like well, there's an awful lot of sloes this year and lots of sloes over the years, but there's also blackberries, haws, lots of different things. And now I have this kind of wild edible garden with loads of wild fruit in it all of a sudden. And it's just this living kind of edible, incredible place to just go out and sit down and have your lunch every day. And it's just it's I can't believe the amount of food that I'm getting out of it for very, very, very little input. It really is. It's been a huge, fantastic learning thing for me. Because we are busy. We're all going around and around and busy. These are wild peas. How beautiful are those? They just happen to appear in the garden. So this is, it's just getting a bit kind of crazy in there. I did put in some flowers and a few bits. And that's the wild hedge you can see up around the back. I suppose there's broad beans, loads of other bits. I suppose I just wanted to kind of say as well a little bit about there's been an awful lot of research done on the positive effects of like being in the garden and just actually being out there and for your mental health. But the new research, or maybe it's not that new, but about this actual hormone or whatever bacteria, positive bacteria that they find in the soil, that we actually, when we're in the garden, we actually can inhale that. It mimics the effects that Prozac and a lot of antidepressants actually have on us, which is kind of very exciting. It's also incredible to think that of about 50 of the mainstream conventional drugs that we use, a lot of them, some of the main ingredients in them are actually from plants, which is kind of incredible also. So I really can't stress, I suppose, how much that we get from plants and sometimes how much we kind of take them for granted. There's also the whole nutritional thing of, wild plants, an awful lot of them are actually an awful lot more higher in nutrients than conventional vegetables, to be honest with you. A lot of them are even organic. They've never been sprayed or touched. And so what they can do is completely supplement your diet. And then there's also these amazing trace elements that a lot of us are missing from our diets. And one of them is this hugely important element, which is iodine, which we all need. This amazing environmentalist on the radio there a few months ago, and he reckoned that we're all actually lacking a little bit of iodine. We all need a little top up of iodine. Remember years ago when we were kids, used to get iodized salt. We lived inland because mostly people get iodine from sea vegetables or seafood. But it's responsible for so many things. It's responsible for metabolism and for proper growth. It's really good for your hair and your skin and your nails and all sorts of things. So even if you're not eating sea vegetables, you can get the benefits of iodine if you mulch your garden with seaweed or use a foliar spray like from seaweed that you mix up with water and spray that on your plants. So there's loads and loads of ways of bringing all that good stuff into your garden. And then, of course, all the self-seeding that goes on. So I have a huge compost heap, or 4 of them. But I have loads of native haws and rowan and lots of other trees around me. And because all the seeds get mixed up with the compost, I end up every year, and because I make haw ketchup, I end up with literally hundreds of baby trees all over the place. So you can't stop it. It's just there. I stuck this big piece of dead willow into the garden about a month ago to help me make something to grow the beans on. The second thing came back to life. It started rooting. I thought it was dead. So you can't stop it. So we have to kind of go with it, It's infectious. It's wonderful to get the children out, growing veg and showing them all the bugs and all the creatures. I mean, it's been really exciting, I suppose, this year to see so many things online and to see so many people in gardens and in nature and doing all that stuff and seeing things that we are just sometimes too busy to see, and going back to that and all the creatures that are out there. It's just been great fun for me, and I'm sure for so many others. What else was I going to be on about? How are we doing for time? Yeah, we're all right. So I suppose, huh?
We're good. We have, it's 20 to 3.
Yeah. Lovely. That was a bit about me and my wild stuff. What else was I going to be saying? I suppose the other thing as well about wild growing and wild gardening, and it's just the myriad of uses of plants that are so beneficial, like comfrey and all the other plants that, you know, are so beneficial in our gardens that we kind of just sometimes forget about. And then of course there's the sea, which is, if you stand at my back door, you can actually hear the sea. And of course I'm lucky, yes, but you know, we live on the coast, a lot of us. So I just wanted to tell you a little story about something that happened to me, not last summer, but the summer before. I'm just showing off for a second. These are stuffed courgette flowers, which are completely divine. A little bit of goat's cheese or whatever kind of nice soft cheese you like, loads of chives. Get the courgette flowers, and it's best to maybe pick them, because if you don't, you end up with what they call blossom end rot on your courgettes, and the whole courgette can actually start to rot. So best to pick the flowers, especially the male ones, and you can stuff them and then you fry them, and they are completely divine. So I'm just doing a little bit of showing off. That was the courgettes before, and then these are the flowers. I grow an awful lot of plants just to look at them. I know. This beautiful white flower is Chinese cabbage that went to flower in my garden in the tunnel, and I just left them there. I just said, no, I'm not eating. You're too nice to eat. You're too beautiful. And now I'm going to save the seeds, and there is these amazing, beautiful flowers. More plantain. This is kelp. So this is one of the seaweeds that is bursting with iodine. I use kelp as an alternative to aluminium foil. So what I do is just get a big piece of kelp, and if it's dried, just put it into some water for 10-15 minutes, and it comes back to being what it was like when you found it. And you can wrap a piece of fish in it, or a sweet corn or a spud or whatever, and you can bake it or barbecue it, and you have this incredible tasting food, but you also get to eat crispy seaweed when you're finished. And it is absolutely divine, and no need for tinfoil, as we all know what that's about. You can also completely wrap a chicken in it, or just get a bit creative, and it's just a wonderful way of using seaweed, and you're getting all the iodine in. There's my lovely nettles in the sunshine. So apart from doing all the wild food and the walks and the workshops and all that, the sea called me about 8 years ago, and I started to take people then and learned all about seaweed, and I started to take people on seaweed walks, and I suppose that's kind of taken over a lot. It's an incredible thing, and I kind of get goosebumps now when I'm thinking about it. I kind of need to go back, even though I was there the day before yesterday. I went down and harvested a load of dillisk. It's up drying at the moment because it was the full moon. Great time after the full moon or the new moon to get seaweed at low tide, because it's a spring tide and the water level is really low, and it reveals all this amazing seaweed. So on one of my walks one day, this beautiful woman from America was telling me about this book called Blue Space, and I went off and got the book. And now realizing that obviously there's a whole science around being near the sea that is incredibly good for you, and being in a blue space. And I have to say that that just couldn't be more true. There's a photograph here that I need to find and to show you, if I can find it. Well, this one will do, but it's there's about 3 beaches I go to close by. One is called Goleen. The year before last, on the really hot weather and the heat wave, got up really early because it was going to be really warm, and I went over at low tide, and the sky and the sea were exactly the same color, and there was nobody else there, just me, nobody, and I felt like I was the only person in the whole world. And I looked out on the horizon, and there was a shoal of humpback whales going across. And I can just say that, as far as I know, I had the closest thing to an out-of-body experience, because I felt like I actually went up from the ground and I was suspended or taken away or away with the fairies or something for a while. And it was actually life-changing and incredible, and I still think about it a lot. And I suppose that's just, you know, one example of being near nature and being near a blue space and what it can do. So time kind of slips away, and you kind of forget a lot when you're near the sea. It kind of takes you over. It's hugely powerful, obviously to be respected, but I couldn't recommend it more highly. We're back taking people on walks, thankfully. So if you ever want to join me for a seaweed walk, get in touch. Yeah, it's there's another beautiful Kinvara up at the blue. So yeah, just millions of photographs of fried nettles and sea spaghetti and seaweed and seeds gone crazy in the garden, and seaweed and cows and meadowsweet and haws for ketchup and vegetables and the shipping container space. Have I said enough?
I think it's the perfect time to take a few questions
Okay.
here now, Oonagh. That was fantastic. I have one here from Eric Conroy. Why can't farmers move from cattle, dairy to tillage, in your opinion? That's a big question.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that amazing program on, was it Eco or Nationwide, actually. It was about regenerative gardening. We're very lucky to have Moy Hill Farm up the road here from us. It's a whole new kind of way of farming called regenerative farming, and it's kind of like using the whole nomadic thing that they would have done out in other parts of the world. And it was incredibly simple, because what they did was they broke it down that, you know, obviously farmers have to make money, but it was the whole thing of because they weren't buying in lots of artificial fertilizers and all sorts of other things, they were still able to keep herd numbers low and still make enough money. And it was a completely lovely way of just looking at farming from a different perspective. And this was a young fella that was doing this. And I just think that we need to look at that. I mean, we live on an island and we import 75% of the food that we eat. But I mean, oil is going to peak or has peaked. I mean, we can't continue this influx and this production of artificial stuff, because I mean, apart from anything, the energy that it takes to even just make that, you know. And I'm going off the question a little bit, but yeah, old habits die hard, I suppose, you know. But there's hope out there. My glass is half full. I really do think that there's an awful lot of amazing stuff going on. Yeah.
Oonagh, that was really, really a lovely presentation, and I think you've kind of taken us all out of our houses and into so many beautiful places and looking at beautiful things. The comments from people as they've been watching are just stunning. Baku loves your kitchen.
Oh.
It's a beautiful kitchen. And Susan Graham says, when anyone says weeds, I say wildflowers. So yes. Really, really beautiful. And Jonathan Angus was commenting about your stuffed courgette flowers and the recipe, and Courtney Pepino was as well. Do you have a favourite wild food recipe that's your kind of your comfort turn to food?
Yeah, I make this amazing Indian aloo sag. It's like with nettles and wild garlic. Absolutely incredible. But you know, the other thing as well, one of my favorite things is I started to ferment wild garlic this year. And I did a nettle and a wild garlic ferment. And there's still a big jar of it in the fridge because it obviously lasts for ages. And wild garlic, because, you know, we get sort of overwhelmed by wild garlic, and you can only eat so much wild garlic pesto, and it doesn't have a great shelf life. So if you ferment wild garlic, incredibly simple. A big bowl of it, massage in about a tablespoon of salt, leave it overnight, the juice will start to run, pack it into a jar, pack it down really tightly, make sure that it's covered with its own juice, leave it for a few days on the counter, and it will actually start to lacto ferment. So it's fermenting from its own juices. You see the bubbles rising. When that happens, just make sure that all the liquid is submerged, all the matter is submerged, and then you cover that and you keep it for a week or two, and then you can start to eat it, and you will eat your fingers after it. It is, and then the older it gets, it takes on this other deeper flavor, like it gets all smoky and stuff, and it's amazing.
Umami, I think it's called.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I have in my kitchen, Oonagh, I have your Wild Kitchen booklet hanging up, but I just wondered that I got a couple of years ago, and I love it. But I just wondered if you had any plans to do a wild gardening kind of booklet or some publication, I think. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. I love it's my biggest thing is to try and share what I do with people. That's where I get the kicks out there, but I get the kick from sharing and being with other people. So I suppose I'd love people to kind of, come up to my place, visit it, and maybe do a workshop and kind of get into it that way. And there's kind of so many avenues, incredible ways to go with this, because someone's talking about doing seaweed art and doing all kinds of, so it's really exciting, and of course I'd absolutely love to do another book. Yeah,
that's great. I've embedded your website into the link there as well.
Okay.
Into the chat, and I had one other question that was personally, I haven't looked at the chat in a minute, but how do you go about, this is a huge question, but what is your process for saving seeds when you're saving seeds in your own garden?
Saving seeds? Yeah, it's a funny thing because it's just so easy. You just let a plant, just leave it alone, and it does its own thing. In nature, even in the tunnel, if you have a polytunnel and it gets too hot and a plant stresses, its natural thing is that it thinks it's going to die, so it produces seed to make sure that its life is continued and the cycle of that seed will go on. That's what it does. So that's what it does in nature, but it's just it takes over its own process. And all plants will go to seed. I mean, some are biennial, so it's every 2 years, like parsley. Obviously, you get all the perennial plants, but they will die back anyway. But a lot of the ordinary, vegetables will just go to seed, and a cabbage will take 2 years also. They're all the parsley family. I think one of the things is, though, not to harvest them before they're they have to be ripe. So a lot of the ones are very easy to harvest, like the kales and the big papery ones. Every pocket and every jacket and every pair of jeans that I own is bulging and contains seeds, because I'm always going around and grabbing seeds from here and there. So some are really easy and some are, and like start off with the simple ones like mange two or peas. Just let them go to seed and let them kind of harden and get papery on the plant, and then take them off, and then they'll dry out. They will dry out themselves, and you'll never have to buy, mange two again. You can give them to your friends. And of course, obviously joining seed savers, and you'll get the seeds, and the whole thing of them is to save them and to pass them on around, I always say this as well with wild plants. If you're going to get into wild plants, get to know a few at a time. Get to use them, the ones you love, and then move on to another few. And I suppose the same with seed saving. Get to save the ones that you really love, and some will last longer than others. And the one thing you have to remember to do is to make sure you label them. Now I know seeds just by, even through paper, I know what they are. I just know that's the way it is with me. But an awful lot of seeds can get mixed up. So it's really handy, if you just, when they're dry, put them into a little brown envelope or whatever, and put the date on it that you saved them, the year and the variety, because you will forget, and that's another trick. And they last for ages.
That's great.
Have we time for one last question, Grania?
Very quickly. I'm being strict.
Oonagh, I have to ask, have you got one favourite place you would go foraging in that is better than all the others you've ever been to?
Oh Lordy.
Or one place you'll always return to, like your favourite place where you'd always go and you'll find something good?
If I was Oonagh, I wouldn't tell my favourite place.
Well, do you know what? I'm incredibly lucky. It was one of the things I wanted to actually mention. I kind of stumbled across this old house years and years ago. I was walking dogs through the back field, and I found this old cottage, and I got in through the window. There was no glass in it, and it was warm. It was November, and I said to I'm going to buy this place, and I ended up buying it. But little did I know that down the road from me, there's the back lane, the donkey road of the old West Clare Railway, and there's a waterfall down there. And it actually marries up. Then you come out at the bottom of Moy Hill Community Garden. And when you go down there, it's like you literally just, that's it. You go way back in time, and you start singing, "Are you right there, Michael? Are you right?" and all those songs. And it is bulging with wild plants. There's Barrington's leek down there and watercress, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And of course, it's like, the seasons, there's something there for every season. There's pig nuts down there. Do you know what pig nuts are? Fairy potatoes. They're these things like walnuts that grow on the ground, and they're incredible, and there's millions of them down there. So that's one of my favorite places, and I'm lucky because I can walk there from here. I'll be taking Lena down there someday. Hi, Lena.
Yeah, I think Lena wants to come visit you.
Yeah.
Me too. Listen, Oonagh, thanks a million. You were fab. And I just want to remind everyone, we're going to take a short break. Oonagh, enjoy your nettle beer this evening.
Oh, I will. Thanks a million. Thanks, everyone. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Oonagh.
That was great. I really loved that. I'm going to take a short 5-minute stretch break, and then we're going to come back with Emer Beamer, who is a slightly different kind of track, and she's going to do her talk to us about what if we radically reimagined the way we see children. And I've watched some of her YouTube contributions to the Ashoka network, and I'm excited for the next speaker as well. So if you take a stretch break, grab a cup of tea. We'll be back at about 3:03. Okay, great.
Brilliant. Bye.
Bye.